Hello, everyone. And today we have with us Gayatri on a Valentine's Day. Uh, Thanks for joining us. And, uh, I've been researching about you and kind of overwhelmed. You're somebody who has worn a lot of hats: writer, director, producer, journalist. And with the number of books you read, I'm sure the guests or the audience will have a great time listening to your thoughts.
Thanks, Ayush, for that introduction. I hope I can live up to the introduction as well. Yeah, I mean, I guess I started out being a journalist, and at the beginning, I was doing more war and conflict reporting, and like, reporting in also in different multimedia formats. So I started out with print, like in the newspaper based in Bombay, and then did my master's, and then started doing some radio journalism, and then TV, and then multimedia formats. And at one point, I stumbled upon a virtual reality headset and saw my first virtual reality film. And then I was kind of blown away by the potential of the medium. And I thought, okay, how could I use this format for the work that I do? And since then, there has been no looking back. So it's really been that I went on together with my partner, Felix Gateker. We co-founded the studio, Now Here Media, and have been using immersive formats and immersive media to kind of power our storytelling projects.
Got it,
Why?
got it. That sounds exciting. I think while Ayush shared your so many hats, I believe a storyteller is the core of that. Bringing to again the fundamental like email or a newspaper, TV, radio, all these are multimedia, and I think AR or VR is just a evolution of how multimedia or how communication is at a fundamental. I have a very ethical question here. Do you see could be a blurring line between what is real and what is not real as we go in the next 10 years and maybe in the next 20 years? Will there be a dystopia society that was shown in the movie Ready Player One where people are binged to a headset all day? Because today, when you see smartphone was not a part of our life maybe 15 years ago, but today we spend close to 40 to 30% of our time on a smartphone, the rest 10 to 20% on a smart TV. How do you see this being a part of our daily life, and when do you see that shift being happen?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Vishal. Actually, I want to cite a study that was done by MIT, where they experimented, like they had a group of children I think the children were 7 to 9 years old, and they were given a headset, and in the headset, they had to view an experience. Now, 1 week after the experience, they viewed something in this virtual reality headset. 50% of the kids couldn't tell if it was real or did that experience happen in real life, or was it media that they had consumed? So I think there is definitely that fear of, because it's such an immersive medium, because you are very much part of what's happening around you when you wear a VR headset. It is a very powerful medium. And so we also need to be careful with who is using it, what are the regulations around it, especially around, like, especially with children. Of course, we have to be careful, but it's just exactly the same with all other formats that you just described.
Yeah.
There's also evidence that, when children use social they get too obsessed with, like, there have been some references to how there's been an increasing trend of teenage suicides with the growing social media consumption. So there are these kind of correlations that are taking place. The key is really media literacy and education, in the same way that we are able to tell the difference between what is real or not on TV, what is a fiction film and what is a documentary film, what is news and what is a soap opera. This is because we got somehow educated. Somebody took the effort, or we were trained in some ways to learn what's the difference between these formats. And in the same way, we need to do that with all new media formats. So whether it comes to TikTok or whether it comes to Snapchat or AR or VR or what's coming in our direction, we really need to also take the effort, like, to understand how these, like, what impact these media formats have on us, and how can we educate ourselves and become media literate to actually protect from the harms of these formats.
Got it, got it. That sounds very exciting. On that, I have a follow up. Today, we know social media is already a dark place where there are a lot of people creating fake IDs and scamming people. There is a lot of harm, and especially to teenagers or kids. And we know people, the Gen Zs or the kids and the teenager, they are filled inside worlds like Roblox, Fortnite. When it is going to be bigger, how do we create it as a more safer place, or are there some kind of body or some kind of industry standard that is being taken into consideration to make it a more safer place?
Yeah, I think there are groups working to actually think about and work together to figure out, okay, what are the checks and balances that we need to have in place. I know that social VR or social XR is going to be a pretty big space that we will, maybe in 5 years, we won't be having a Zoom call through a screen, but we might actually be in an immersive space with our bodies and with, uh, embodying ourselves and having this conversation perhaps around a virtual table. And before that can happen, there need to be a lot of um, a lot of regulations have to come into play. Right now, it's kind of the wild, wild west.
Yeah,
Everything kind of goes. But I know that there are bodies that are working, there are people who are working, and it is kind of the responsibility also of organizations such as Meta or Apple, which says they are going to come out with a headset. Like when they create these platforms, it's also just simply the same way. Like on Instagram, we have whether it's good or not is debatable. But
yeah,
on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, we have mechanisms in place to see, okay, how can we stop abusive content from circulating? How do we make sure that fake news is not, circulated? I'm not saying that it is where it needs to be. It can always get better, but we need to do the same for new media formats.
yeah.
So
I think that is amazing. Yeah, yeah,
following
yeah.
up
I go
on
ahead.
that you said, in 5 years, we might not be having a Zoom call, but we might be in a more immersive experience where we'll have our avatars and we might be walking and playing some games while talking. For our audience who hasn't been in such a space before, what difference will it make? Like, I'm coming from a very resistive point of view that, hey, why do we need to get away with Zoom? It's so convenient. So,
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think there are very interesting use cases. Like a conversation like this is probably not the best use case for
okay.
taking place in an immersive, format. But let's say we are a group of architects who's working on model, who we are designing a model of a building together. Uh, Now, the model of the building will be in 3D,
Yeah.
and it's very hard to replicate or hard to it's not very hard, but it's a little bit harder to communicate that in a 2D medium like a screen. And that's why architects today, print out their models, 3D print their models, or, build their models so that you can see them in space. And that's a very good use case of how, you can create like something that is very spatially relevant, can take place better. Conversations around that, work around that can take place better in in an immersive medium such as VR. There's also things maybe we are collaborating together on let's say, a design. Yeah. And we are doing that over a distance. And we know this through the pandemic, it has kind of accelerated remote collaboration. Um, Collaborative work is really much better when we are in the same space. Over Zoom, it can lead to fatigue. It can, there are some things that are not necessarily intuitive. So it's better if we have one whiteboard in this immersive space that we can both write on. or post-its that we can put on the walls, like virtual walls of a space that we might share together. So I think that our use cases definitely for collaborative work that makes it appealing to try this out.
So what are the use cases that you in Now Here Media or you guys are working on?
Actually, our focus lies on, we are a company that is working mainly on storytelling. So we are trying to tell stories that are powered by immersive formats. Yeah. So we are working at this intersection between storytelling, technology, and social impact. So what we try to ask at the start of every project is, okay, what do we want? What is the real social change we want as a result of this project? I can give you an example. Currently, we are collaborating with an NGO in India called Teen Book. They provide comprehensive sexuality education to adolescents and teenagers. So we are collaborating with them on creating a mobile augmented reality application. And now, with the help of this mobile AR application, adolescents, students will be able to get gamified, immersive content that is driven by storytelling that will answer difficult questions about being a teenager, about being an adolescent, around puberty. And this is information that is, taboo in India. We know this. So we're trying to see how we can make sex education more accessible and at the same time more appealing for children and adolescents, so that they don't have to go to the wrong sources to find the information.
I think that's brilliant, and that's a wonderful use case.
That's exciting. Yeah.
A lot of terms exist: AR, VR, XR. What's the difference?
Yeah. It's a really good question. So let's start with virtual reality. So virtual reality is basically when your real environment is completely replaced by a virtual environment. So this might mean that you wear a headset and your vision is kind of blocked, like you have this headset in front of you and you cannot see anything in your real physical environment, and it's replaced by a virtual environment. That's virtual reality. Now, augmented reality is when in your real environment, in your physical environment, you might see digital or virtual objects. So one of the biggest examples or most known examples of augmented reality is Pokemon Go. Yeah, so you have your real world and then you have these virtual Pokemons in your environment, and the app uses your geolocation to find out where you are. And now XR or extended reality is a term that is kind of an umbrella term for all of this together. So some people say, and this is where the technology is heading, that in a few years there might not be already there are headsets in the market where there is no difference, like the same headset can do both virtual reality, so it can block off your entire environment and completely immerse you in a scene, or it can do augmented reality, which means the headset can actually filter in, like can read your real environment and place virtual objects in your real environment. So it's the same kind of headset that performs both functions. Okay. And that is extended reality. So an umbrella term for all these different realities that we are experimenting with.
Got it. Thank you so much for grounding us on the basics. On that, I want to understand by when we can see a mass adoption, because today VR headset is a very premium product. It's like someone who is owning a high-end Apple iPhone, they can potentially buy a VR headset. When do we see that being coming to the masses? Like today, let me take an example of India. Almost everyone has a smartphone. Close to 70% of the country has a smartphone. When can we see such technology coming at a scale? Because then only we will see a bigger impact of these immersive solutions and storytelling and media.
Yeah. That's kind of a million question, because everybody who's working in
Yeah,
the space wants to know the answer to this.
got it.
Because I mean, I think there was this, around 2004 to 2008, there was this new wave with the Oculus first, the Oculus Rift.
I recall Google made a cardboard in
Yeah.
I think 2014-15. It was like 1,000 rupees.
Yeah.
But I think that device died. Then they launched Google
Yeah, I
Glass.
mean,
That
it
was
was just a
successful.
cardboard and you get it for like 50 rupees. And
Yeah.
now I think now there are better ones. Then there were these headsets from Samsung that were functioning with the phone, together with the phone. Those have also gone out of stock. And basically, the technology is evolving, and it's evolving fast. But it is, as you say, there are a lot of hurdles. First of all, the hardware is still not something that works without any troubles. So I work with the technology, and every time there is a screening, there is some kind of an exhibition, there will be tech problems to solve. And
Yeah.
this is, despite me knowing exactly how these things work and what needs to be done to make them work, I still struggle with that. So someone who is like an average user, as long as it doesn't get as easy to use as a smartphone, it's not going to be mass adopted. So there are those struggles with the hardware and the software. Secondly, as you rightly mentioned, there's also the problem of cost. Right now, the Meta Quest 2 costs, I think, $500 or something, which is quite a lot of money. You can buy three smartphones in India for that, or more, for that money. And what is the value of spending that money, and what can you do with it? There's not so much at offer at the moment, whether it's content, whether it's applications, whether it's social VR. There's not, it doesn't, it really doesn't. There are some false promises that are out there, but it's not really meeting those expectations. Now, people say, or there are some rumors that there might be an Apple headset that will come out this year. And a lot of people who are working in the industry and in the space are really pinning their hopes on this, because when Apple launches a product, it
Yeah.
works. So,
No, I think Apple is
um,
more on a hype cycle. When Apple launch a product, it becomes part of a luxury product, then it becomes aspirational. So everyone wants to
yeah,
own it. I think that's a
yeah.
great strategy
So,
though.
yeah. So there might be something like that happening in the XR space as well, but we don't. I mean, again, they have been saying that they will launch a headset since 2021. So, you know, we have to, I won't believe it until it's there.
Yeah,
um,
that's true.
so I think for me as a creator and as a storyteller, my strategy is to define the target audience very clearly. So, for example, we just made a film in Ukraine, and it's a film that's available on the Meta Quest. And we knew that we wanted to reach a target audience that was high level executives, decision makers, policy makers. And we screened it at a closed screening this January at the Davos World Economic Forum. So there, we can create environments or opportunities in a way that we are able to meet our target audience. If it's a limited target audience, but it's a highly influential target audience. And for something like that, it works really well. So if you are a company who is looking to create a brand, and in the beginning you want to convince a fixed group of people, let's say 1,000 people is who you need in order to sell your brand, then you can create a screening opportunity which will make sure that in 3 days you can screen it to these three people, and then I would say it's worth the investment. If because it is a medium that is way more effective than, and in the storytelling, in conveying the story and in the immersion that it offers, it's highly effective. So you have to, but the costs are high, so you need to make sure that the people who are viewing it are going to make a difference, like with
Got
VR.
it.
But with AR, it's accessible and you can download it on almost like on a lot of Android and Apple devices, like on smartphones. So AR is something where you want to reach a mass audience, like we did with the Teen Book AR sex education app. we knew, okay, a lot of children will want to, a lot of adolescents will want to use this app. So we cannot create a VR experience. So that's why we launched an AR app.
Wow.
Got it. That is clear. I'll maybe slightly change. I have one more question, but before that, I'm super intrigued by the towers of books that you have made, rather the two towers. What are you reading these days?
Actually, yesterday I just finished reading this book called Why Fish Don't Exist,
Okay.
which is a really great book by Lulu Miller. She's a journalist. I think she's a science journalist, and it's a book about um, evolution, about love, about loss. So a lot of different subjects that go hand in hand, and it's very well crafted, and it's really well written. And if you can, I would ask you to, yeah, get your
Definitely,
hands on
I'll
it.
try it out. I'll try it out. But
Yeah.
most of this immersive are generally inspired from some science fiction or some fantasy fiction. Oh, just out of curiosity, what was your inspiration to get into this, and how from where it stemmed out into what the amazing work you're doing today?
Yeah, actually, my inspiration was not fiction, but reality. So I remember it was 2013, and I was reporting on the war in Syria. And I had just come back from my trip, and I was, it was 2 years into the war, or 1 year into the war, and I was asking myself, what's going to, when is this going to end? And now, 10 years later, it's still the same question. It's really incredible. And at that point, I was getting tired and fatigued from the reporting that I was doing, that it was not having any impact, changing anything on the ground. And that is kind of the moment when I asked myself, hey, the reason I'm doing the work I'm doing is to have some impact in the real world, to change things for the better, to make the world kind of a better place. And I had the feeling that the tools that I had in my hands at that point, which was, film, radio, text, and print, were not working for me. And coincidentally, at this point, I encountered virtual reality. And I thought, okay, let me try this to do the work that I do. So I think my inspiration came more from reality than from fiction.
So I was browsing through the website and I realized there's some work that you have done on I'm not sure if it was Syrian war or the Ukrainian war, but could you talk a little more about that?
Yeah. So we did one of our latest projects is called You Destroy, We Create, which is about the impact on art and culture in Ukraine, what's happening as a result of the Russian invasion. And we are actually going to exhibit the piece in Delhi, Pune, and Hyderabad, I think. At some point in March. There's the Habitat Film Festival, which is going to be organized by the Goethe Institute. So Delhi is going to happen from March 16th to 23rd. So if any of your listeners happen to be in Delhi and want to see the piece, I think it's a good opportunity to do so. So I think my team and I, we spent 2 weeks in August 2022 on the ground in Ukraine, documenting how the Russian army has, since the full-scale invasion, has been targeting cultural sites of cultural significance and importance in Ukraine. So there have been targeted attacks on certain museums, monuments of cultural importance that talk about Ukrainian cultural identity. Because from the Russian, like from Putin's perspective, it is a war that is very much about identity, and identity is closely linked to culture.
True.
So by kind of erasing these monuments or places of cultural significance, it's a tool to kind of erase Ukrainian identity. So our mission on the ground was to document these targeted attacks, but also to document what are people on the ground doing, how are they responding. So we meet with a museum curator in Odessa who has brought her collection, an entire collection of her museum, to a safe space, to a bunker, and is now running programs in the basement of the museum. Why in the basement? Because the basements are the only places that are safe when there are air attacks. So those are the places that are where you see also a lot of cultural activities happening nowadays. And then we also travel to Kharkiv and meet a street artist who is painting the streets of Kharkiv, not knowing if the walls that he's painting on will survive, tomorrow or will get bombed. But his spirit is really inspiring, and he says that he is preparing the city, he's beautifying the city for when people come back to Kharkiv.
Wow.
After the war.
Such an amazing.
And yeah, and it was very, very inspiring to be in Ukraine, to see kind of the Ukrainian people united and the energy, like already a lot of rebuilding and restructuring of the country reconstruction has started. Even though the war is still ongoing and there is still destruction. And also artists are responding with their art. So we met an opera singer who, during the day she is filling up sandbags and protecting monuments, and then she goes to the rehearsal and, she says, hey, if we are not doing culture, why are the soldiers fighting? What are they protecting? If we can't keep the opera open, why are they fighting on the front line? So it's kind of a really interesting spirit at the moment in Ukraine.
And it's beautiful to know that how culture is bringing people together so that a war-struck city or a battlefield feels happier or more lively. It's crazy. And hats off to
Yeah.
you.
I mean, even the street artist story gave me almost goosebumps. It's so good. Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe I'll change. It was very inspiring to hear the story. I think maybe there should be such more thing, and hope things get better in that area.
What's the work that you did with UN and Nat Geo? I was very interested to see those logos.
Yeah. So actually, with National Geographic, we created when the COVID pandemic struck, they were commissioning a bunch of people to. I think we lost Vishal.
Yeah, might be the internet. We can continue. Not a problem. Yes.
Okay. So they wanted to document the lockdown in different cities around the world. So we were filming in Berlin right as the pandemic, like this was March 2020, and documenting like how empty the streets are, what's happening in the city, how are people responding to the pandemic and to the lockdown. And with the United Nations, we actually showed one of our pieces, Home After War, which is about the risk of improvised explosive devices in Iraq. And it was produced in 2018. We exhibited it 3 times at the United Nations, twice in Geneva and once in New York. So it was part of their larger exhibit. We worked together to create this exhibition, also with our NGO partner.
Wow, that's really good to know that, technologies and storytelling is changing this space to this level. Changing gears, some of our audiences, they want to get into this industry of metaverse, AR, VR, XR. How can they? What's the possibilities? How can they contribute to start with? Like somebody wants to become a developer or somebody wants to be in tech, and how can they go about it?
I think one of the important things to keep in mind is, okay, what are the skill sets that you are coming with to this medium? Are you a storyteller? Are you a producer? Are you a musician? Are you a sound designer or a game developer or a 3D artist or an animator? Yeah. So this is kind of the basic question to ask yourself first. And then in case, let's say you gave the example of a developer. So in case you are a developer or a programmer, one thing to probably get into if you are not already into it is, programming or developing in a game engine like Unity or Unreal Engine. These are the two big game engines that will help you create games for even narrative content for AR and VR. So for instance, there are two kinds of virtual reality experiences that you can create. One that is cinematic, so you just film with a camera, and then the workflow is similar to creating a film. So you film with a camera, which is not necessarily a DSLR, but it's a camera that has multiple lenses, so it can film in 360 degrees. So you will get a panorama kind of 360 image that you can then edit in an editing software. Yeah, and then the workflow is similar to a film. Then you can create VR or AR or XR experiences that are more interactive and that have a game logic. And for that, you will need to work in a game engine like Unity or Unreal. And in order to do that, I think you can, of course, you can do everything on your own, or in both cases, you can do everything on your own. You're a one-person show, or you work in a team and you become specialized in something. So you could be specialized as a programmer, or you could be specialized as a storyteller or a scriptwriter or an interaction designer. So there are a lot of roles, and there are different ways of doing this. In the same way that if you are creating a video, you can do everything on your own, and maybe you're multi-talented and it will also help you. Or you can say, no, I only want to edit, and I only want to edit in this medium. Or you can say, I work in a company, and I only want to do front stack development, front end development, not full stack. So that's really up to you to decide if you want to specialize in a certain area, or if you want to be kind of master of all, and then you won't be as good at everything, but then you will know how to do a little bit of everything.
Got it. That's very informative. I have a problem today as someone sitting at a brand. Whenever I start with such an idea to create something in the immersive field, I generally face two barriers. Number one is cost. Creating something in the immersive is very expensive. Number two is niche audience, or the if I talk in terms of marketing, what is the ROI of doing something apart from driving innovation or driving PR, because there is not a lot of mass adoption today. So rarely such activities generally turn into an ROI. AR campaign do, because Snapchat has commoditized the AR as a behavior, but something slightly more immersive or something in the field of VR. How do you guide any marketer to get started in this journey? What should be the things that they should keep in mind, and what kind of goals or value creation they should look at when they are planning to get into this domain?
Yeah. Again, it's a really good question. And I think we need to define the metrics here first, especially with VR and also with AR. So before we had social media, we never measured something in likes or likes or comments or shares.
Yeah.
We didn't have that metric. So in the same way, we have to kind of define and come up with metrics that make sense for these new media, especially when there is no mass adoption at the moment. So is it really about, like, we have been doing some research with some universities at different, with different projects of ours. And one question we ask is, okay, how do people engage emotionally with the content compared to video, let's say? And we have results, like initial qualitative results, where we've done focus group discussions, where we showed them the same video, like the same content as video and as an interactive virtual reality experience. And people said and self-reported that their experience in a VR headset, inside a VR headset, was way more immersive. They felt more engaged, and they were urged to take action. So these are, if you are trying to market something, this is really good, really good information to have, to know that there is a medium that is way more convincing than your tool set at the moment. Yeah. The problem, of course, is it's not going to reach too many people. So it will make sense if you are selling a high-end product. So a lot of real estate companies actually are using virtual reality to kind of show their spaces or visualizations, because there, I think if you sell a product which is, costing crores, then you can spend a little bit of the money in the marketing. And if you're able to visualize a beautiful home for someone, which is going to bring you some return on investment. So at the moment, I think it makes sense to focus on these kind of areas or opportunities which are going to bring you, where you can find that, okay, each of your product costs a lot. It's a premium product. And you don't need to convince a mass audience, not necessarily. It's enough for you to start with something that is, a certain niche. And once it has established, by the time you're also, another advantage if you start now is that you will be a market leader in using this technology. You would have learned a lot from your previous experiences in the next 5 years. So those are incentives to step in right now.
For
Got
example, if
it. Very
someone
clear.
is trying to sell premium villas or flats in a very urban, posh society, that's when they should maybe try this out rather than just simply making a video.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't have, let's say you don't have, you're building something and you don't have the building yet, but you want to convince your clients and your customers that this is how it's going to look. And the visualization of something in VR is going to be much better than on screen.
Got it. With that, this brings to my closing thoughts on this. So it was a very amazing interaction with you, and we got to learn a lot. While I think as a uh, uh, cinema fan, I'm excited to see a movie like Avenger or Avatar in a VR. As a person who is into video gaming, I'm scared that I am going to spend 18 to 20 hours in that world. With that, maybe any closing remark on what are your point of view on the future of this, and then maybe you can wrap up.
Also, is
Yeah.
someone making a movie in VR?
I mean, there are movies in
There are a lot
VR.
of
I mean,
YouTube videos also, you can go and watch them,
Okay.
but they're not
yeah.
of high quality, I would say.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But there are films that are being made in VR. There are adaptations of games, like there is this game called Vader Immortal,
Yeah, I have played
that,
that.
and Half-Life Alyx is also available in VR.
Mhm.
So there are all these big kind of games that are also coming to being adopted for virtual reality, for
Yeah.
sure. It's coming. And the same with Hollywood. Hollywood will step into VR. Again, it's a business that will only make sense for them to come in once they know there is return on investment. So, yeah, I think nobody believed that streaming services would be,
I think streaming
anything
is
to,
going to evolve. They're going to evolve. Now you're watching
yeah,
Harry Potter on a flat screen. Next we are going to be in that world,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
is how things are going to, and even I think it has started. I think Disneyland in Orlando, they have started some VR rides where you
VR,
just
exactly.
get
Wow.
an headset and you get into a Star Wars world and you be in that world. So yeah,
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
exciting.
Hmm.
Great. Then I think with this, we come to an end. Amazing podcast. Um, we have never said this, Gayatri, but we would love to have you again on this podcast. We learned a lot and we had to cut down on a number of questions because there was something really interesting that we wanted to talk about. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you so
And I
much.
am definitely sure that our audience is going to love you and we love to have you back.
Thank you so much, Vishal and Ayush. Thanks for having me. All the best. And yeah, hope to be here again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a great day ahead.